Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics.
Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Carl Carlson.
And this is Fred Schenkelberg, not AI produced.
It's the real Fred.
Yeah, that's right. I'll cough later to prove it.
I can recognize your voice.
There you go. Yeah. Good luck with that.
Well, Fred, I've been thinking about AI. And of course, it's a lot not just in the news, it's in our life and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've read 3 books on the subject, so I'm getting dangerously on the edge of knowing a little tiny bit about it.
What? You read it? Didn't you do the AI summary in some app and just did the Cliff Notes is probably going out of business now.
I think so. That's unfortunate. I love Cliff Notes.
Yeah, me too.
But I was thinking about we had podcasting sessions scheduled, and I think, what's the important, timely subject? And I'm not afraid of controversy that would be fun to talk about. And I thought, well, what's the relationship, or should be the relationship, or could be, between AI and our 6-step reliability process? And I thought, I'm not going to prepare for that. I'm just going to go ahead, start the podcast, and then think about it in real time with you as to what we have 6 steps, and which of them might have a connection to AI and which ones may not, or which ones might you go into a ditch if you go too fast on AI, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I thought that'd be fun to talk about.
It's interesting. Was it yesterday, 2 days ago, one of the blogs I follow, and he writes a short blog piece every day, 7 days a week, and has been doing so for close to 20, 25 years. And it just takes on all kinds of stuff. But one of them recently was on AI, and he says, if your job can be replaced by AI, it's probably not a job worth having. If you can use AI to be very productive and not just copy the answers and use that, if it's a base for making better decisions or for analyzing a problem or doing something like that, then it's a tool. Then it actually is, you're leveraging a new paintbrush, is kind of the way he phrased it.
It's pretty good.
And I thought, I've dabbled here and there and played with this or that, but I haven't really found an application for what I do, for doing things I do. And if in the question of, if you're creating a reliability plan, and in the book we talked about, there's so many nuances to lots of conversations, lots of understanding the business and priorities and key decisions that need to be made and what information goes to that. I'd have to just try it. I'm trying to think of what set of prompts would actually get you a viable response, and would that be an effective way to approach it, or would it be you got to spend 10 hours to get something that you should be spending 10 hours talking to people in the organization, instead?
Yeah, where's the value add? Let me just dive right in, because I just pulled up the 6-step process.
Mm-hmm.
So step 1, develop reliability strategic vision. I'm thinking that that's one of the lesser interfaces to AI, because the AI you could say, what's our strategic vision? And then it'll come up with something.
Right.
But I want that vision to be something that's really well interfaced with management as well as employees and bought into. So there's a process. So, maybe there's some primer, I think, thought starters, as to strategic vision, but you want it to be real and interesting and exciting to the company, and to move you where you need to be. And so that's your overall goal. And I'd sure hate to have an AI interface develop that on its own.
Oh, yeah. Well, I fully suspect there's an aide to the senior vice president somewhere that's doing this right at this moment. What is our strategic vision concerning quality and reliability?
Yeah.
And they'll get, chapter 1 of 150 different books, none of which would apply to that particular circumstance.
Right.
Right. I can see it, though, as if you're not familiar with the language of strategic objectives and goals and so on, it could be what are possible ones for
Yeah.
this industry or this type of product or whatever, so that you can go in and go, boss, are we doing this, this, and this, or doing this, this, and this, or some other flavor of this, or, so you could at
If you
least
get the
approach the
conversation
conversation
started.
started. Yeah.
Mhm. But you don't want it to be the conversation ender.
Yeah, exactly.
Ending.
Well, I think it goes back to, and we might need to update the book, because having a clear understanding of the existing or the, supported, or it might not even be known, but just inherent in the way the organization operates, is it allows you to create reliability plans and create products that meet those goals without changing the culture.
Right. Right. Exactly. So that's so important.
Yeah.
Well, okay, just looking at timing here, then step 2 is perform reliability gap assessment. Now, I can see AI can help with a lot of thought starter questions on what types of questions we should be asking,
Mm-hmm.
so that you brought up scope in the last podcast, and that I think the same thing is true in reliability. Is, what's the scope of the reliability project or reliability program, and then within that scope, what kinds of questions would be asking in order to identify the gaps.
Yeah,
And
that's where I hesitate. Even in the book, you listed all kinds of questions, but we knew, and I think we wrote about it briefly, was you don't ask all these questions this way.
right,
You
right,
don't. You need to figure out for the person you're talking to, what's the appropriate part, where's their energy, where's their focus, what is important to them. If they're not talking about torque on screw number 897, let's not dwell on that and go into detail on it. Let's ask, I think doing your homework and knowing what scope of stuff to ask is great. And I think AI could help you flush that out for a particular area. But I don't think you don't want to be on a chat system recording it and getting prompts from this third party.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. So that's why I use the word thought starter. In other
Yeah.
words, the thought starter might be, okay, you don't necessarily do it. You just say, here's some thought starter ideas, and you go, okay, that one applies, that one doesn't apply, that one applies, and then it might miss something entirely. And so that would be something I would look for, possibly.
Yeah. Keep in mind that it's not an interrogation. Your most common question would be, tell me more about that. Why is that important?
Exactly.
You should be more on extracting critical information of where the barriers or the gaps are.
There's a lot of human body language here, and I've been in meetings where we're talking about strategic vision and then move to gap assessment, and it takes some skill. I like you're pointing out here, is to go beyond just the rote questions and go beyond the rote answers, because there may be a thread that is hugely important, but it takes a little bit of encouragement and communication skill to open up that thread. And you're not going to get that from a computer list of questions.
No. That's why we wrote 2 chapters about soft skills.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And so there might be a little bit of help, but maybe not much. And so I'd be concerned about the gap assessment going to artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
How about identifying reliability related decisions?
Um, I don't, that's the one I was struggling with the most, because we're not the decision maker, and an outside agent is not the decision maker. It's the person, the program manager, the senior executive, the chief engineer. They've got reputations on the line.
Yeah.
And it's their decisions. It's what's important to them. And so the only way you can really identify those is to listen. And it's part of the gap assessment to get you started with that. And then it's all the other conversations and listening. We listed all kinds of techniques for identifying those, but it's, what are key important decisions? I don't know. Can't imagine a prompt that would tell me what Sarah Jenkins, the program manager, keeps her up at night on this project.
Exactly, Fred. I was thinking about the same thing. What keeps someone up at night? What gives them heartburn? What does their career depend on?
Yeah.
Uh, what are the big issues of that program that could go wrong? Like when you're developing a new device, you don't want a huge marketing failure, for example, that makes a lot of newspaper coverage. And those things are so experiential. It's hard for me to imagine that one being a strong connection to AI. But now the next one says select the right reliability methods.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where I think you could have a really good database of reliability methods. And if you've organized it right and you have the right AI interface to it, you could understand the limitations and the strengths and when you use certain methods and when you don't.
I tried that once. I asked, it was a couple months ago. I asked, I don't know which system it was. Um, uh, I need to estimate the reliability of this, and I made up a product in 2 months. What are my options to get what are the options and pros and cons to get an accurate, cost-effective estimate of the reliability?
Oh, he had to say MTBF.
No, it did do parts count prediction though. It was, but it gave me like 5 or 6 options,
Mm-hmm.
and it was in general is that a full on physics of failure study, if it doesn't already exist, will be expensive and time consuming. It got that right, and it got reliability predictions quick and easy, but not very accurate, kind of thing.
Okay.
And I was happy with that, but it missed. Well, how important is it? When he talked about decisions in the last one, it was the nuance of, is this a critical, must get it exactly right that we know that it'll last 5 years with very low failure rate? Or is this a nice to have that we have a long history that I think we're going to be all right? There's not a lot of risk here. It's still a decision we need to know, but the precision and cost to accomplish it had this other vector of importance that my prompt didn't include. And I don't know how it would change. It's something I've just thought of as I probably need to go.
Well, that's an interesting musing. You remember the story I've told many times when we did our tutorials together.
Mm-hmm.
My first reliability plan on the Chevrolet Caprice.
Mm-hmm.
I had dozens and dozens and dozens of reliability tasks. I was basically putting everything possible onto the piece of paper.
The more is better approach.
Yeah, more is better. And that would, of course, a wrongly programmed AI could easily do that. It could come up with literally hundreds of tasks. So the importance and applicability of the tasks to apply to the decisions and close the gaps, that's a skill.
Well, I think it may help with that awareness part that we struggled with in the book is if you're not familiar with accelerated life testing, it's really hard to know what the pros and cons of it are, what are the options within that area. If the only way you know how to do stuff is a demonstration test, then it'll, but you have a time constraint, and AI could say, oh, you could try accelerated testing. It may be a way to say, all right, here's the options. And I think that's why we added the appendix saying, well, here's a laundry list of all kinds of different things that you need to be familiar with to some extent, because it may be just the tool you need or just the method you need to move forward to solve that problem. And we talked about it as, what are the options you have? What is the range of ways you can do this? It could be just guess.
I think you're right here. The step 4, select the right reliability methods, can benefit from a database and an intelligence that may go beyond the reliability engineer's knowledge of certain methods, so that they don't bias. You don't end up biasing
doing their favorite tool.
Yeah, we're going to do the FMEA and everything, or everything's going to get a Taguchi project because that person happened to go to Taguchi school.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it'll help push that out a little bit. And I think an experienced person will be familiar with a range of tools. I think a good reliability engineer is also familiar with a wide range of just possible methods and avoids that I have a toolbox with a hammer and a screwdriver and that solves every problem. And I think AI could help move you out of that. Now it takes that person to say, oh, I need to go learn about ALT to make sure it's the right approach and tool here, or find somebody that knows about it to be able to use it. But it's, if you're not going to use the recommended range of results, then why bother with AI or any other system? So,
Well,
but
and there's a lot of in the books that I've read and the presentations I've listened to, there's a lot of focus on training the AI model.
mhm.
And there's something where training the AI model on, so you don't just want to go out on the internet and say, what's the body of knowledge of FMEA? You're going to get a lot of stuff. Some of it's good, some of it's not good.
Yeah.
And same thing true on all the different reliability tools. So you got to be careful when you go out and search on the broad internet. However, you could train an AI model on best practice for a whole range of reliability tools, and that would be a very smart model.
Mhm.
And that could be very useful on step 4.
I just had another idea for a test of these. That idea is,
What's that?
is say, all right, there's a handbook out there. I think SATBHD.
AHP.
Sounds like ADHD to me for some reason, but um, it's a handbook and it lists all kinds of methods and it talks
Mhm.
about what the method is, what's the pros and cons, basic outline of how to do it, stuff like that. It's not a be all end all handbook that you're an expert in it, but it's a couple of pages for a wide range of methods.
Mhm.
And is do a prompt saying, I need a tool to estimate uh, the reliability performance over 5 years for this product, and I have 3 months to do it. And what are my options based on this handbook or these set of references? I wonder how it would do with that.
That's good. I think
Yeah, I'd have
that's
to
a
give
good
that a
idea.
try.
And if depending on how a company uses AI, the company's trying to use a broad, Chat GPT or something
Mm-hmm.
that's on the shelf, or if a company wants to train a model, and they could train the model on 0009, like you're bringing up, and
Mm-hmm.
other
And there's
standards.
other resources and standards and documents and books and out there. I'm
Yeah.
just thinking when I was back at HB, we had internal sets of documents for design for reliability. And it wasn't a be all end all, but we found them to be very effective tools across the range of products that we were working on and supporting. Um, use that as the source material plus maybe oh, now I'm drawing a blank on his name. Dick Moss, Richard Moss was a co-author of Reliability Engineering and Management Handbook, and
Hmm.
you know, pile that into an agent basically, and then say, all right, within the scope of these things, how would you approach this particular circumstance or select a particular set of tools? What are my
Very good.
options? Stuff like that. I think in that realm would be great. Just don't go the next step and say, well, it recommends an FMEA. Now just fill it out for me.
Yeah, right. Oh, please don't.
That's a whole
Well,
other
and
discussion.
that's worth a public announcement, which is be very careful if you're a listener to this podcast, and be very careful about AI automatically doing FMEAs. And this is subject of a different podcast, and I've written about this on the subject, but there's a value to research and preparation and intelligence input to FMEA, but automatically generating it has a lot of downside.
Well, we've been
Not going
doing
to
it for
talk to
years
anybody about
for,
that.
I think, well, let's save it for another podcast.
Yes.
The last couple of steps of it is implement it. And that might be a place where project planning, you'd have to have a pretty extensive input to AI saying, all right, this is going to take this long. It may need this many samples. It may do this, that. Can you set up an optimized schedule for doing this? That I have no idea if that would work or not. I think you would have to put in all the research that you would need to do it by yourself anyway. Maybe have a full out PERT chart and say, is there a better way to optimize this, or what are my options?
Let me think out loud with you. If you had step 1, 2, 3, and 4, that's the strategic plan, the gap assessment, reliability decisions, and the methods selected, I could see an outline, call it a draft, not final, a draft or input outline of what type of tasks not would be needed at a high level. In other words, we're going to need this, this, and this. I could see that. And even if you put into that model the program timing, so we're going to need, to freeze the design by this date. We're going to need, different, you could even have timing on the tasks. And if you put in to the model the expertise that you have in the organization, you could put who's responsible for different tasks as a draft. So you might get some help on that.
Yeah, it's one I haven't ever experimented with. And I'm quite sure that the is it project managers and folks that live and breathe PERT charts and Gantt charts and similar systems and in Agile and all the other happy stuff. There might be some application there or not, but it's outside of my field most of the time. I'd look at it as I inherently know that these outputs affect these decisions on these deadlines, and what are my options in that constraint. And I don't know that how to prompt a system to know what an FMEA can be used to help you focus on what sensors to use in your downstream testing, or what areas to focus on in your process FMEA. It has so many linkages. Each of these methods is not an island to themselves. And so whatever system you're using to get some artificial intelligence involvement with it would have to understand those ins and outs of these various systems to be able to coherently link them in a sequence of some sort. It's possible.
No, but it's a great point. If you're going to train an AI model, then the linkages between FMEA and testing and process control plans and everything else has to be well understood by the model.
And weighted by importance and for your situation.
Yeah, and weighted by importance and human resources. And so and then lastly is execution. And I could see some benefit, maybe there's a lot of good project management tools for execution. So I don't know that how much artificial intelligence you need on that, other than, as you pointed out many times and in the book, you have to adjust in real time.
Yeah.
And when you run into a roadblock, you may need to steer around it. And so there might be some help there.
Well, there's a handful of ways. I think it's more of a supporting role to help you frame questions, to identify options, to conversation starters, stuff like that. I don't know, and it's worth playing with, I imagine, but I don't think we're going to just say, oh, hey, we got project XYZ, here's our project requirements document, create a reliability plan for me. I'll be back by lunch.
No, please.
We're not there yet.
We're not there. And so what we've tried to do here is to take a look at the 6 steps, which are really important steps, and then understanding the principles of each step, which we have in our book. And you understand those. There may be I think there will be some linkages to where you can use AI as input to help out in some way, but you have to know the limitations of AI to do good job on that, and maybe get a model going and train the model on certain reliability methods might be helpful. But you have to use it as inputs rather than purely as outputs.
Yeah. I saw an article the other day. I'm trying to remember the source. I want to say the Atlantic, but that might be in the news for a different reason, is in my mind. But it was AI is making me dumber. I ask AI for this and that and everything, and I have stuck. And the person realized that when they were faced with something that they had to solve themselves, AI was no help, or they didn't have it available and access to an agent. They found it very difficult, and it was supported with some research and some other parts of it. It was, if you don't exercise your brain, it will stop being strong. It'll not help you when you really need it, kind of thing. And yeah, and I think I talked to Chris about it a couple of weeks ago, and it's something Chris says all the time. When you're a reliability engineer, you're not allowed to check your brain at the door. That's why we're here. And it's true for any engineer. It's not a rote job. You need to think. And I think that's the gist of what we're saying here. And a supporting tool like a book or a document or a guideline or AI.
Training,
yeah,
webinars. It's all part of it.
Part of it, but
I think this is the opening conversation. I'm not this is the first time anybody's talked about it, but we're just beginning the conversation on AI relationship with reliability. And there's going to be more on this subject, I'm sure, as companies ramp up, and a reliability engineer has to know the limitations so they can speak up.
Yeah. And if if you're facing this, if you can't hire somebody unless AI is not possible to do it, how do you deal with that? And what areas have you found useful for it? What's working for you? We just brainstormed a couple of ideas, but how does it really work for you? I mean, for me personally, it's a wonderful spelling and grammar checker on my system. Although I find that I lose the nuance of my voice in writing if I accept every single recommendation that it makes. But that's a whole different topic on a different show.
A different topic, exactly.
But if you've got let us know. If you've got experience with this or questions about it like we do, let us know. Head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. There's a couple of ways to get in touch with us. Carl and I and the other hosts are available through LinkedIn and our About pages. And we'll know if you're using AI to send us a question. We can chat. So, just kidding.
Yes. Well, good discussion, Fred.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up, Carl. I'm sure we're going to talk about it some more.
See you later.
Later. Cheers. Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.